No one warns you that the family you marry into can be a story someone wrote for you to believe. I didn't understand that in one clean moment. It arrived slowly, the way most important truths do. In small pieces I kept finding reasons to excuse. Because I was 62 years old. I'd buried a wife I loved for 31 years, and for the first time since her funeral, I felt like a man with a future again. Her name was Renata, and for 16 months, I thought she was the second chance I never expected to get. But I'm ahead of myself. For those of you just joining me, my name is Walter Kowalczyk. I spent 38 years running a family lumber and hardware supply company out of Erie, Pennsylvania, the same business my father started in 1961 with a single flatbed truck and a line of credit he was too proud to ever fully use. I took it over when I was 29. My son Peter runs the day-to-day now, though I still show up most mornings out of habit more than necessity. We're Polish-American, 3 generations deep in northwestern Pennsylvania, and in our family, Sunday dinner isn't an invitation, it's a summons. My daughter-in-law makes pierogi from my late wife's recipe now, and my brother Casimir, everyone calls him Kaz, has never once in his life needed to be asked before showing up at my door. So when I tell you I met Renata at a charity gala for the county hospital and that within 4 months I was completely, foolishly, gratefully in love with this woman, understand what that means coming from a man my age, a widower who thought that chapter of his life was finished and filed away. I wasn't looking for anything. I had made peace with quiet evenings and a house that echoed a little. Renata walked into that ballroom in a green dress and asked the bartender a question about wine regions that made him laugh out loud, and something in me that had been asleep for 4 years simply woke up. We dated for a year before I asked her to marry me, on the pier in Erie, looking out over the lake at sunset, because my late wife Barbara used to say that water always made hard conversations easier. Renata said yes before I'd finished the sentence. My son Peter cried on the phone when I told him. My brother Kaz said, "Well, it's about damn time you smiled again, old man." Everyone welcomed her. Everyone except, it turned out, the family she claimed she didn't have. Welcome, family, if you're new here. Settle in, this one's going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment below, and tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. Trust me, you're going to want to stay for this. Here is what I need you to understand about Renata before anything else. She was not cold. She was not distant. She was warm, funny, endlessly attentive, the kind of woman who remembered the name of your dentist's dog. She made me feel, every single day, like the luckiest man in Erie County. So when the subject of her family came up, and it came up early, because in my world family comes up immediately, her answer didn't strike me as a red flag. It felt like a wound. My parents and I don't speak, she told me one night, about 7 weeks in. We were sitting on her balcony in Pittsburgh, wine glasses sweating in the summer heat, the city lights spread out below us like something out of a magazine. They were very hard people when I was young, controlling, cold. I had to put a lot of distance between us just to become who I am. I told her I was sorry. What else can you say? It's fine. I just don't talk about it much. They won't be at the wedding. I need you to understand that. I told her it didn't matter. And I meant it, because I trusted her, because she'd never given me a single reason not to. What I hadn't fully accounted for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Renata. They weren't, not even close. But the Kowalczyks operate on a certain frequency, and that frequency includes a deep need to know the people connected to the people we love. It isn't nosiness. It isn't judgment. We just believe you understand a person better once you understand where they came from, who raised them, and whose table they sat at as a child. By our 9th month of engagement, the silence around Renata's family had started generating its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in late July. My daughter-in-law had made a full spread, kielbasa, golabki, the works, and we were all crowded around my table. Peter and his wife, my brother Kaz, my granddaughter Susie home from college, and Renata, radiant as always at the end of the table. Everything was moving along fine, until Kaz, who has never once, in 71 years, considered a social boundary he respected, set down his fork and looked directly at Renata. "Renata, honey, I gotta ask you something." She smiled. "Sure, Kaz. Where's your people?" We've known you a year, and I ain't heard one word about a mother, a father, a sister, nothing. The table went quiet the way it does when someone finally says the thing everyone's been carefully avoiding. Renata's smile held, but her eyes shifted, just slightly. My parents and I aren't in contact. I've mentioned that. You mentioned it. I'm asking about it. Kaz wasn't being cruel. Kaz was being Kaz. Because in our family, and I say this with love, you don't marry into someone whose people you've never laid eyes on. It isn't how we do things. Kaz, my son's voice, one low word. Kaz picked his fork back up. But the question was already on the table, and no amount of Golabki was going to bury it. Later, after Renata had gone home, my son found me in the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of my good vodka and leaned against the counter. She's a good woman, Dad, he said. Not a question, a statement. She is. I believe that. He nodded slowly. But Dad, we're going to be standing in a church. We're going to make promises in front of God and everybody we know. And we're going to do it without meeting a single person from her family. Her parents were cruel to her, Peter. I believe her. I believe her too. But cruel people still exist somewhere. They got an address. Somebody knows where they live. He looked at me hard. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into. I didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder and went back to the living room. I stood in that kitchen a long time after that. But here's what I need you to understand. I still wasn't suspicious. Not really, not of Renata. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the thought I couldn't shake, the one that kept surfacing on the drive back to my empty house, was this. What if her family looked at me and decided I wasn't what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds coming from a man who built a successful business and has a family like mine. But Renata moved in a very particular world. Corporate healthcare consulting, downtown Pittsburgh. The kind of social circle where everyone has an opinion about which vineyard region actually matters. Her condo looked like something out of a design magazine. Her friends wore labels I had to look up. She carried herself with a polish that I found beautiful, but that sometimes, quietly, made me feel like an old man who talked too loud about sawmills at dinner parties. What if her parents were the same? What if they had money, standards, expectations I couldn't anticipate? What if they looked at me and Renata saw everything through their eyes, and something shifted? That was my real fear. Driving north on I-79 the following Saturday morning in August, it wasn't that I expected to uncover a lie. It wasn't that I thought anything was wrong. I genuinely believed I was going to meet intimidating people who might not think I was good enough. I was going to show up, take whatever they gave me, and try to convince them I was the man their daughter had chosen. I honestly thought I was the underdog in this story. Finding her parents hadn't required a private investigator, just a routine, tedious piece of paperwork. 11 months into our engagement, Renata had moved into a condo my company happened to own a stake in, part of a small commercial real estate portfolio I still manage on the side, and since we were getting married in a matter of weeks, our accountant needed her to formally sign the corporate lease documentation for tax purposes. I was at my desk on a Friday afternoon when my office manager set the processed paperwork down in front of me. I glanced down at the official identification she'd uploaded to the portal. Renata Marie Lindquist, not Ashworth, the name she used socially, the name she'd introduced to my friends. Lindquist. Out of pure curiosity, I ran a quick property search under that name. A few clicks later, I found an old public record, a dormant Facebook profile untouched since college, and a home address on Birchwood Lane in a town called Corey, Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half north. An hour and 40 minutes later, heading north on I-79, I told Renata I had a property inspection scheduled. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The whole drive, I rehearsed introductions in my head and quietly dreaded the moment someone would open a door and look at me like I wasn't what they'd had in mind. I got off the highway and rolled into Corey just before 10 in the morning. I followed the GPS into a neighborhood of modest ranch houses, clean streets, American flags on porches, the kind of place where people know their neighbors by name and wave from their driveways. I slowed down. There it was. A well-kept little ranch house with a flower bed running along the walkway and wind chimes on the porch. And in the front yard, moving slowly with a garden hose, was an older man in a faded Steelers t-shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering the flower bed with the unhurried patience of a man who had nothing more important to do. This wasn't what I'd pictured. I sat in my truck a full 5 minutes, recalibrating everything. No gate, no luxury car in the driveway. Nothing suggesting the people in this house had spent one single moment worrying about whether someone else was good enough for anything. These weren't intimidating people. These were ordinary, decent people. And for one unmistakable moment, I felt something close to relief. I got out and walked up the driveway. He noticed me when I was about 10 feet away and narrowed his eyes with that cautious look people give a stranger approaching their home. "Can I help you with something?" I stopped, took a breath. "Sir, you don't know me. My name is Walter Kowalczyk. I'm engaged to your daughter, Renata." Harold Lindquist dropped the hose. Not fumbled it, dropped it. Water ran slowly down the driveway while he stared at me, and his face did something I wasn't prepared for at all. It crumpled. Not with anger, not with suspicion, with relief. 2 years of accumulated grief, finding somewhere to finally land. "Doris." His voice cracked on her name. "Doris, come out here." And in that instant, standing on a driveway in Corey, Pennsylvania, watching a retired man try to hold himself together, my understanding of the entire situation turned completely upside down. Inside the Lindquist house, everything I thought I knew about Renata started coming apart. Quietly, methodically, while I drank coffee I hadn't asked for and ate cookies, Doris served me with trembling hands. The house was clean and modest and completely full of Renata. School pictures, birthday photos, a prom photo on the mantle, a college graduation portrait where Harold and Doris stood on either side of her, beaming. Harold had his arm around her shoulders. Doris's face was so proud it almost hurt to look at. These were not the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. The story unfolded carefully. Harold had spent 34 years as a machinist at a manufacturing plant outside town before retiring. Doris had worked as a school nurse for most of Renata's childhood. They'd helped put her through Penn State, a partial scholarship, some loans they'd co-signed and quietly paid down themselves, no debt left on her shoulders. They were proud of that, deeply proud. When Renata moved to Pittsburgh and started building her career, things shifted slowly. The calls got shorter. Visits stopped. She started appearing in photos online with a different last name, Ashworth, her middle name, at events with people Harold and Doris didn't recognize, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the conversation about the wedding, the request for $40,000. Harold's grieving counteroffer of $8,000, everything they could give without wrecking their retirement. Renata's response, "If you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it," blocked that same night. Doris slid something across the table. A sealed birthday card, unopened, postage marked, returned to sender in red ink. Renata's handwriting on the return address label. Their address. I stared at that red stamp for a long moment, then slowly pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the text message Renata had sent me the night before. The one I'd read right before falling asleep, the one that had pushed me to make this drive in the first place. "Honey, such good news." I reached out to my parents. "They finally apologized for everything and want to have lunch with you tomorrow before they head out of town. I'm so excited you're finally going to meet them." The kitchen went very quiet. I looked up slowly. Harold and Doris Lindquist were sitting right across from me, completely unaware of the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Doris read it. She set the phone down gently and didn't say anything. Harold looked out the kitchen window at the flower bed he'd been watering when I walked up. I thought about the drive up, my rehearsed introductions, my quiet fear of not being good enough for these people. I almost laughed. I almost laughed because I'd spent weeks worried Renata's parents would look down on me, that they'd be too polished, too wealthy, too demanding. And here they were, in Corey, on Birchwood Lane, with wind chimes and a garden hose and 2 years of unopened birthday cards. The person who decided somebody wasn't good enough wasn't them. It was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who'd driven up I-79 nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man who drove back to Pittsburgh that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is that the great one never breaks character. Not even at the table, not even while everything is coming apart. I didn't confront her that night. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I got back to our parking garage in Pittsburgh a little after 2, sat in my truck a full 10 minutes, and made a very deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was afraid. Not because I doubted what I'd just seen and heard in that kitchen in Corey, but because I'm my father's son, and my father taught me something about the moment right before a confrontation that most people get wrong. He used to say, "Walter, the man who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish telling the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a confession." I rode the elevator up and stood outside our door a moment. I could hear Renata inside, moving to the low sound of the television, completely at ease, completely unaware. I put my key in the lock and went in. She was on the couch with a glass of white wine, her laptop open to some venue's website. She looked up and smiled the way she always did. Warm, kind, like I was the best part of her day. "How was the walkthrough?" "Promising," I said. "Long drive, though. You look tired. Want me to order something?" "I want you to explain to me why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Corey with our return address stamped and read." That's what I wanted. "Sure," I said. "Whatever you're in the mood for." I sat down beside her. She leaned her head briefly on my shoulder and went back to looking at venue photos. I looked at the screen and saw nothing. On the outside, completely ordinary. On the inside, I was dismantling everything. That night, I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through something complicated. I separated what I knew from what I assumed and built a timeline. As far as I knew, Renata's real last name was Lindquist. Her parents were Harold and Doris of Corey, Pennsylvania, alive, present, and heartbroken. They hadn't mistreated her. They hadn't been controlling or toxic in any way that photograph or that kitchen suggested. They'd offered $8,000 for the wedding, been told it wasn't enough, and been erased from the guest list that same night. As far as I knew, Renata had texted me while sitting in her parents' kitchen, telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch, which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie, which meant there was a next floor, which meant there was someone she planned to bring to that lunch. Who? That was the question I was trying to answer before I fell asleep. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next 3 days, I paid attention differently. Not suspiciously, I was careful about that. I didn't check her phone, I didn't follow her, I just listened. The way you listen once you finally understand that every conversation has been running on 2 levels at once, and you've only been hearing one of them. I noticed she mentioned her boss more than usual, a man named Gregory Pruitt. Gregory thought, casually, that the Whitfield account might close sooner than expected. Apparently, Diane Pruitt had also been at that same fundraiser. Small mentions, nothing alarming. The kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they're trying to get someone comfortable with a name before that name becomes important. She was getting me used to them. She'd been doing it for weeks, and I'd never noticed. Gregory Pruitt. I looked him up from my office the following Tuesday, door closed. Senior vice president at Renata's firm, a wealth management company headquartered downtown. His photo on the company website showed a man in his mid-50s, silver hair. The kind of natural confidence you only get from decades of never having to justify yourself anywhere. His wife, Diane, showed up in a social column about a hospital gala 2 years prior. Polished hair, highlights, the whole picture. A wealthy, respectable couple. Exactly the kind of people you'd want beside you if you were trying to convince a traditional family that you came from somewhere impressive. There they were. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the Pruitt's corporate photo. That's when I understood Renata wasn't just a con artist. She was trapped in the prison of her own enormous insecurity. She'd spent a decade reinventing herself in Pittsburgh, tailoring her identity to climb a social ladder that meant nothing to my family but apparently meant everything to her corporate friends. When her father refused to sacrifice his retirement for 1 day of theater, that wasn't just a financial disagreement to her. In her mind, His modesty threatened the polished illusion of wealth she'd sacrificed so much to build. To keep the lie alive, she hadn't just distanced herself from them. She'd had to erase them completely. And then I thought about what she must have told the Pruitts to get them to agree to this, because here's what I know about people like Gregory and Diane Pruitt. They didn't get where they are by being careless or stupid. For Renata to get them to sit down at a lunch and present themselves as her parents, she'd have had to give them something that made sense. A coherent story. Something moving enough that two busy, important people would say yes without asking too many questions. What had she told them? I let it sit 2 days, and Thursday morning my phone buzzed with a reminder Renata had added to our shared calendar. Lunch, Gregory and Diane, at the Harborview downtown. Saturday, 12:30 p.m. She'd added a note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, honey. This means everything to me. I stared at that note a long time. Means everything to me. I thought about Doris Lindquist pressing a sealed birthday card across her kitchen table. I thought about Harold Lindquist's face when he read that text over my shoulder. Yeah, I bet it did. That Thursday I called my son from my truck, engine running, parked in the garage below our building. He picked up on the second ring. I need to talk to you. Come home. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at my son's kitchen table in Mill Creek, the same table where Renata had charmed everyone a year earlier, where Kaz had asked his question, where everything had seemed completely normal 2 weeks before. And I laid it all out, every piece. Corey, Harold and Doris, the birthday card, the text message, Gregory and Diane Pruitt. My son sat across from me with his hands folded on the table and listened without interrupting once. When I finished, the kitchen sat quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" 4 words. That's all. No lecture. No dramatic reaction. I have to go to this lunch, I said. I need to build something bigger. My son nodded slowly. And the Lindquists? I'm going back to Corey after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next. He looked at me hard. And what comes next? A dinner, I said. A real gathering, with the right people in the room. Another pause. Then my son stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, I'll talk to Denise about the restaurant. That was the whole conversation. My daughter-in-law's reaction was a little less contained. She came in from the living room, where she'd apparently been listening to the entire conversation, which in our house isn't considered eavesdropping, it's considered being present, and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and an expression I can only describe as the specific fury of a woman who fed someone her homemade pierogi and got lied to for it. Some of us are family enough to get told the truth, she said, and her mother is in Corey with a birthday card that came back unopened. I know that kind of pain, Walter. She crossed the room and put both hands on my face, the move she's been doing since Peter first brought her home and wanted my approval. You fixed it, she said quietly. Not just for you. For them too. Saturday came. The Harborview is the kind of place where the lighting is specifically engineered to make everyone look a little more important than they actually are. Renata had made the reservation. I arrived, as expected, 5 minutes early and sat facing the door. They came in together, Renata in the middle, one hand looped through Gregory Pruitt's arm, Diane on her other side. Renata was glowing. Gregory moved with the confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Diane was all polite smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile, firm handshake. Walter, Renata said, her voice tinted with a particular triumph. This is my dad, Gregory, and my mom, Diane. Gregory. Diane. Not Harold. Not Doris. Gregory. Diane. I shook both their hands. I've heard so much about you both. I hadn't heard about them at all, because they hadn't existed in this role until about a week earlier. We sat, opened menus, and for the next 20 minutes I watched Renata perform with a fluency that, under any other circumstances, I would have found genuinely impressive. She laughed at Gregory's remarks, half a beat too fast. She referenced shared memories with Diane. Trips, restaurants, family moments got mentioned, and Diane followed along carefully, the way someone does when they're working from a script they only half know by heart. Gregory was smoother. He asked me questions about the business, made relevant comments about the commercial lumber market, generally carried himself like a man who'd done his homework and was determined to be convincing. Everyone was performing. The whole table was a stage, and I sat there eating grilled walleye, being absolutely charming. "So, Gregory," I said, setting down my fork with the relaxed calm of a man without a single worry, "Renata has told me a great deal about you. It's clear you've had a very significant presence in her life." Gregory smiled. "She's been like family to us." "Like family? That's everything," I said. I looked at Renata when I said it. She gave me back that radiant smile. "Keep smiling, sweetheart. I'm going to be honest with the two of you," I continued, leaning forward slightly, "the way I do in negotiations when I want someone to feel like I'm letting them in on something. My family takes formal matters very seriously. My late wife's mother would never forgive me if we didn't do this properly." I paused. "We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing extravagant. Family, good food, a toast. My family just needs to welcome the people who matter to Renata before we get to the altar." Gregory glanced at Diane. Half a second of silent calculation. "We'd be honored." Renata grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. "Perfect," I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back. A full, radiant, triumphant smile. The smile of a woman who believes she's won. The trap was already built. She just walked into it, smiling. If you've been with me a while, drop your comments below. While you're at it, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. For the next 6 days, I moved with quiet precision. Monday, I went back to Corey. I called Harold from the driveway before I even knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking. We sat in the same kitchen, the same coffee, the same table. I told them about the lunch, about Gregory and Diane Pruitt, about the performance, about the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. Doris's hands went still around her cup. "Walter, we don't want to make a scene." "Doris." I looked at her directly. "My family will stand in a church and welcome anyone who walks through those doors into our family. She deserves to know who she really is." I paused. "And you've spent 2 years sending birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room." "Not for drama. Because you're her parents, and somebody has to say that out loud." Harold leaned forward and covered Doris's hand with his own. He looked at me. "What time should we be there?" Tuesday, I sat with my son and my brother Kaz in Peter's home office and walked them through everything in detail. My son listened, asked 2 precise questions, and then said, "I'll handle the restaurant." He picked up the phone, and that was that. Kaz's reaction required immediate containment. "I want to say something to her at the door," he growled, narrowing his eyes. "No, Kaz." "Not one word," I said, putting both hands on his shoulders. "I need you to do something that's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Not one word until I stand up to make the toast." He looked at the ceiling, then at my son, who was biting the inside of his cheek. "Fine," Kaz finally hissed. "But I want a double order of golabki before anybody sits down, and I'm holding the door when we walk out." I looked at him and nodded. "That I can arrange." All the pieces were in place. Kowalski's Chop House downtown, my son's choice, a good one, a restaurant that felt like a home, not a stage set. Private dining room in the back, white linens, candles, warm lighting. My daughter-in-law personally handled the menu and added a small framed photo of my late wife Barbara to the welcome table because, in her words, she should be there too. Harold and Doris Lindquist drove down from Corey Saturday morning and checked into a hotel near downtown. Harold called me Thursday night to confirm. His voice was steady and careful, and at the end of the call, after we'd gone over the details, he said quietly, "Walter, whatever happens tomorrow in that room, thank you for going to Corey, for knocking on that door." He paused. "You chose well, even if you don't know it yet." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just told him, "See you tomorrow, Harold." I pressed my suit Friday night. I got into bed beside Renata, who was already asleep, already dreaming of tomorrow's version of events she'd imagined. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and thought about a man in a faded Steelers t-shirt watering a flower bed on Birchwood Lane. A birthday card sealed with a red stamp on the front, a kitchen table where 2 people had been quietly waiting 2 years for someone to finally show up. Someone was showing up tomorrow. So were they. You can build a lie as tall as you want, but the moment the right people walk through the door, all of it comes down. That Saturday morning in September woke me with a stillness that doesn't come from peace, it comes from certainty. I lay there a few minutes listening to Renata in the bathroom, the shower, the hairdryer, the particular rhythm of a woman preparing for a performance she believes she's already won. And I thought about Harold Lindquist pressing his good navy blazer in a hotel room downtown, Doris, standing in front of a mirror, trying to hold herself together. Two people who'd driven an hour and 40 minutes down 79 for a dinner. Their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited. Get up, Walter. Let's finish this. Renata took 3 hours to get ready. 3 hours. I sat in the living room watching football highlights with the volume low and let her enjoy every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion. Once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I told her she looked beautiful, because she did. That was never the problem. The problem was everything hiding underneath the beauty. She wanted to leave early to check the venue. I told her to go ahead, that I had a quick call to make and would meet her there. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door with an expression like everything in her life was perfectly arranged. The second the door closed, I picked up the phone and called Harold. He answered on the first ring. "You doing all right?" I asked. "We're ready." His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd made a decision. "Doris is dressed. We're ready." "Good. When I text you, you come in. Doesn't matter what's happening at the table. You just walk in and stand there. You don't have to say a word." A pause. "Harold." "Yeah. I'll see you the second that door opens." "I know. I just want you prepared, Walter." His voice stopped me. "I've been preparing for 2 years. I've been ready since the night she blocked us. I've been ready every birthday of Doris's that didn't get a phone call." Another pause. Shorter. "We'll be there." I held the phone a second after he hung up. Then I put on my jacket, found the ring in my inside pocket, and left. Kowalski's Chop House on a Saturday night is exactly what it should be. Warm, comforting, the smell of garlic and butter greeting you at the door like an old friend. But the private dining room in the back runs on a different frequency. Quieter, more intentional, white linens, low light, round tables arranged so everyone can see each other. My daughter-in-law had been there since 4 in the afternoon. When I walked in at 6:30, she was adjusting the centerpiece flowers with the focused energy of a woman who understands that the details of a room tell people exactly how seriously you take them. She looked up when I came in and studied my face the way she has since the day she started dating my son. "You okay?" "I'm fine, Denise." "You sure?" "I'm sure." She crossed the room and put both hands on my face. She looked at me a long moment. "Barbara," she said quietly, "used to say the truth always finds the most inconvenient moment, even when nobody invites it." She straightened my collar. "Let it land tonight." I nearly lost my composure right there. Nearly. My son was near the bar talking to Kaz, already dressed in his dark gray suit, completely composed. He glanced at me when I approached, a slow nod. That gesture said, "Everything's ready. The room is set. Do what you have to do." Kaz was sitting at a side table with a plate full of golubki and the focused expression of a man fulfilling a solemn obligation. He looked at me, pointed at the plate, then pointed at me. His version of, I held up my end. "Don't forget yours." I almost smiled. They arrived at 7. I heard Renata's laugh in the hallway before the door even opened. That particular social laugh, half a tone higher than her real one. The one she uses when she wants a room to feel like a party before she's even walked into it. She came in first. Navy blue dress, hair perfect, every detail flawless. Gregory Pruitt followed. Silver hair, expensive suit, moving with the natural authority of a man who's never once doubted his right to be anywhere. Diane beside him, elegant and polished, pearls at her collarbone. Renata moved through that room like she owned it. She kissed my daughter-in-law on both cheeks. She shook my son's hand with both of hers. She laughed at something Diane said near the bar and touched her arm fondly. She was magnificent. Genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. When she reached my side, she looped her arm through mine and leaned close. "This is perfect," she whispered. "Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted." I know, I said. That's why I did this. She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat. The food arrived. Roasted chicken, kielbasa, a spread my daughter-in-law had designed personally. Warm bread came out wrapped in cloth. The table filled with the noise of what looked, to anyone watching, like a genuine family dinner. Gregory was warm and attentive, asking my son about the business, with what seemed like real interest. Diane complimented Denise on the restaurant choice, and Denise accepted the compliment graciously while privately thinking things she'd never fully be able to explain to Diane. Renata was glowing, relaxed, victorious. I ate. I laughed at the right moments. I refilled glasses, asked questions, and to anyone watching, I was a completely relaxed man enjoying a family dinner. My phone sat face down in my jacket pocket. I had a text to send. I was waiting for the right moment. That moment came at 7:48, in the short lull between the main course and whatever was supposed to come next. The table was warm, the wine was flowing, and Renata was laughing at something Gregory had said. I pulled out my phone and typed one word to Harold. Then I stood up. The clink of a knife against a glass, that clean, clear sound that tells a room, stop, listen. The table went still. Renata looked at me with that full, radiant smile, the smile of a woman who thinks the next 60 seconds are going to be a toast about how much I love her. I let the silence stretch a moment longer than felt comfortable. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. My voice was calm, even, the way my father used to speak when something really mattered in our family. A dinner like this isn't just a nice evening. It's a statement. It's us saying, these people are real, these people matter. We don't say that lightly. I looked, slowly, around the table. My father taught me that the people you invite to your table tell everyone exactly who you really are. I paused. So I want to make sure tonight we have the right people at this table. I looked at Marco, the restaurant manager, standing near the back wall. He'd been briefed. He knew his cue. He walked to the side door and opened it, and Harold and Doris Lindquist walked in. Harold in his navy blazer, the one that didn't quite fit like it used to, the kind you could tell he'd owned for years and saved for occasions that mattered. Doris in a burgundy dress, a small purse held in both hands, chin lifted, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who had decided she was not going to fall apart in public, whatever came next. They crossed that threshold into the silence of the room, and Renata saw them. I was watching her face. I'd positioned myself specifically to watch her face. The color drained like a tide pulling out, fast, complete, absolute. Her lips parted. Her hand, the one holding her wine glass, went completely still. The glass tipped. I leaned over without looking at her and steadied it, set it down carefully on the linen. She turned to me. Her eyes ran the fast calculation of someone trying to find the story that saves them. I could watch it happen in real time. The search for an exit, an angle, some version of this she could still control. Walter, her voice came out thin, barely audible. I went to Corey, I said quietly, not loudly. I wasn't performing for the room. I've been talking to your parents for 3 weeks. I drove up 79 one Saturday morning because I told myself, maybe I can fix this for her. Maybe I can give her family back as a wedding gift. I let that land. I found a man watering his flower bed on Birchwood Lane in a Steelers t-shirt. I told him my name and he dropped his garden hose. The room held its breath. Renata, your father worked as a machinist for 34 years. Your mother was a school nurse most of your childhood. They helped put you through Penn State, and they made sure you never carried $1 of debt for it because they wanted you to have everything. My voice stayed level, steady. They offered you $8,000 from their retirement, and you told them if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't exist. Her mouth opened. You don't understand everything that happened when I sat in their kitchen. I was in that kitchen, I said quietly, like a door closing. I saw your school pictures on the refrigerator. I held the birthday card you mailed to our address, still sealed, unopened. And while you sat there, you texted me telling me your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Gregory and Diane Pruitt. Diane had both hands flat on the table in front of her, her face completely pale. Gregory had gone entirely still. Gregory. Diane. My voice shifted, something calm and respectful. I know exactly what she told you. She told you my family was deeply judgmental, that her biological parents had passed away years ago, and asked you to act as honorary family mentors so she wouldn't have to face a traditional wedding alone. She used your kindness and your standing as a weapon to fill two empty chairs in a play. I gestured toward Harold and Doris, standing near the door. Those are her real parents. Diane looked at Renata, a long, slow look that didn't need words because words wouldn't have been enough. Then she looked at Harold and Doris, and something crossed her face that was much worse than anger. It was recognition. The specific recognition of a woman who just understood that the person she thought she knew doesn't exist. Gregory didn't say anything. He folded his napkin, set it on the table, the gesture of a man leaving who has decided there's nothing left worth saying. I turned to Renata one last time. She'd stopped looking for the exit. There wasn't one, and she knew it. She just stared at me, eyes bright, jaw tight. The whole architecture of everything she'd built reflected back at her in every face in that room. I grew up watching my father treat people, all people, like they mattered. The man who parked cars, the woman who cleaned the office, a retired machinist from Corey who gave everything and got told it wasn't enough. I reached into my jacket pocket. That's the measure I was raised on. Not the address, not the job title, not the clothes. I looked at her. By that measure, I don't know who you are. I pulled the ring from my pocket. I set it down on the white linen tablecloth in front of her. Not thrown, not dramatic, just set down. Quietly. The way you put something down when you've carried it too long and you're finally ready to let it go for good. Then I picked up the floral centerpiece from the middle of our table. White flowers. Simple. Denise's choice. And I crossed the room to where Doris Lindquist stood. She was fighting it. You could see the effort in her jaw, her shoulders, the careful way she was breathing. Short and controlled, the way people breathe when they're holding something enormous and can't afford to let it fall in public. I offered her the flowers. She looked at them, looked at me, then at Harold, who had driven an hour and 40 minutes from Corey, who in his best blazer had held his chin up through the hardest walk of his life. She took the flowers and completely came apart. Not a cry, a whisper of one, the kind that surfaces after 2 years of accumulated grief, finally finding somewhere to go. Harold wrapped his arm around her before she could make the first sound. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet, his chin steady. He pulled her close and looked at me over her head. And then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped forward. One step. Doris still tucked under his arm, and he held his free hand out to me. I shook it. He gripped hard. The grip of a man saying something his voice still couldn't fully manage. I held it a moment. Then I stepped back. My son was beside me. I don't know exactly when he'd moved. Peter Kowalczyk shows up when it matters. That's just what he does. He looked at Harold Lindquist for a moment. Then he stepped forward and extended his hand. I'm Peter, he said. I should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry. Harold shook his hand and swallowed once. Harold, a breath. Thank you for raising a man like that. My son glanced at me sideways. Just for a second, just long enough. In 38 years, I'd never seen him that proud. My daughter-in-law didn't shake Doris's hand. She pulled her into a tight hug. Both arms, immediate, unconditional, the way the women in our family embrace people who need to be held. Doris clung to her, the flowers still in her hands. We walked out together, my family and the Lindquists. Denise's arm looped through Doris's. My son and Harold walked side by side with the quiet ease of two men who had just recognized something rare in each other. Kaz brought up the rear, holding the door. Kaz paused at the front entrance, turned around just once. I looked back too. Renata sat at the center of that table in her perfect dress, in her perfectly constructed life, the ring on the linen in front of her, the centerpiece gone. Gregory and Diane Pruitt stood near the back of the room. Diane already had her coat on. Gregory had a hand on her back, and neither one looked at Renata as they moved toward the exit. Her friends, the elite circle she'd built, performed for, and constructed her entire second identity around, sat frozen in their chairs with the particular discomfort of people who just witnessed something they can't unsee and don't know what to do with their hands. Nobody went to her. Nobody pulled her aside. Nobody offered a version of events that made her look better. Nobody played the part she needed, because there were no parts left to play. The entire cast had walked out. She just sat there, as if, finally, irreversibly, she'd been seen. Kaz stared at her a long moment. Then he shook his head once, slowly, almost with sadness, and let the door swing shut behind him. Outside, on the sidewalk, the clean, cold air of a September evening in Erie moved around us like it had no idea what had just happened inside that restaurant. I stood next to my son and took a deep breath. He put his hand on the back of my neck, something he's done since he was a boy. He didn't say anything for a moment. Barbara would have done exactly the same thing, he finally said. That was all. That was all he said. Across the sidewalk, Harold Lindquist looked out at the lights of downtown Erie, Doris tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands. They breathed the same crisp September air, like people who'd just gotten back something they'd stopped hoping to ever see again. Harold caught me watching him. He nodded once. Not a thank you, something there isn't a word for. I nodded back. Some deals close for profit. Some you close because there's no version of yourself you can live with that walks away from the table. That night, I closed the most important deal of my life, and I didn't make a single dollar. Some people lie to erase the ones who love them. Renata built an entire life on top of that erasure. And on one Saturday night in September, in a private dining room at Kowalski's Chop House in downtown Erie, every single floor of it came down. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. I'll see you in the next one. A birthday card sealed shut for 2 years weighs more than any lie ever could. What Harold and Doris teach us is simple. Love doesn't need a grand gesture, just an open door and a little patience, waiting for someone to finally knock. Real family isn't the polished version we perform for others. It's the people who kept the porch light on the whole time. Go call someone you've been meaning to call. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its life lesson still reaches your heart in a real way.